When most people think of a Macintosh PowerBook 100 series machine, they're thinking of one of these. This is a ubiquitous design that Apple produced for many, many years in the 90s across several different models. Although it has little bearing on the video, this particular unit is a PowerBook 145B, but they all shared the same basic design. Well, almost all of them anyway. If you take a look here, you can see what the display looks like. I want to call that a 9.6 inch display, but I don't remember. Like I said, with some exceptions, these all share the same basic design. The same overall chassis look, the same keyboard, same trackball. The same 9.8 inch display, although some of them were passive matrix, like this unit. Some of them were active matrix. There were a couple of color models that had slightly smaller screens. Cover back here, covering up the ports. May or may not have had a modem. This one's got it, but the same basic design. So when I show you this, you see that, well, other than the fact that the Apple logo is in the middle, there really isn't any difference. Just from the top here. We'll open this one again. See the 145B. Then we'll open up this one. You see, well, there's the first sign of a difference. This actually has a taller screen in it. I believe that it is still the same 9.8 inch diagonal. Quick correction, this has a 9.5 inch display, not a 9.8 inch display. But it obviously makes up for that in the resolution, as we'll talk about later. It's still a passive matrix screen. And otherwise, again, really no difference here. Still got the same trackball. Still has the same keyboard. Type's exactly the same. Still has the same contrast and brightness. Active matrix models generally did not have the contrast control, because having a contrast control made no sense on an active matrix display because they simply didn't need it. A few did. The PowerBook 180 is a good example. But the big difference comes when I flip the machines around. Wait a minute, what the hell is this? Before we discuss what this weirdo really is, it helps to talk about Apple's product lineage, at least when it comes down to the Macintosh PowerBook, and in particular the PowerBook 100 series, because once I explain that, what this is will actually make a lot of sense. In October of 1991, the PowerBook 100 debuted with 3 models. The PowerBook 100, which in and of itself was a weirdo, I have one of those, I need to fix it. The PowerBook 140, which was the middle-of-the-road model, and the PowerBook 170, which was the high-end model. In that order, they represented the low, the middle, and the high tier of Apple's product lineage. In August of 1992, Apple replaced the 140 with the 145. In October of 1992, Apple introduced 3 new models: the PowerBook Duo 210, the PowerBook 160, and the PowerBook 180. So now there were 4 different models instead of just 3. We'll shove the PowerBook Duo off to the side for a minute because it's only peripherally related to our discussion. In February of 1993, Apple introduced the PowerBook 165C, adding it to the existing product lineage. In June of 1993, the 145 was replaced by the 145B, and the 180C was also introduced to the product lineage. The 165 was introduced in August of 1993. So excluding the color machines, at this point we have 3 different models. We have the 145B, the 165, and the 180. The But what about that PowerBook Duo that I shoved off to the side earlier? That is where this comes in. Because even though this PowerBook 150, I mean, not this one in particular, but even though the PowerBook 150, introduced in July of 1994, was a direct replacement for the PowerBook 165, the middle-of-the-road machine, that's not where the design comes from. This is actually a modified PowerBook Duo 210, which is why, as you can see, it has no expansion ports. Now, obviously, it's got the bare minimum that you would have expected to see on a PowerBook Duo. You do have the one printer port, as well as the SCSI port. If I'm being honest, I don't think the SCSI port was actually included by default on the PowerBook Duo, but maybe it was. But the PowerBook Duo was Apple's sub-notebook, which again makes sense when you consider that it is what replaced the PowerBook 100, which itself was basically a sub-miniaturized Macintosh portable. Designed by Sony, by the way. Apple had basically nothing to do with the design of the PowerBook 100. Not the 140 and 170, just specifically the 100. That's neither here nor there. So what this basically, in essence, is this is a PowerBook Duo 210 in a PowerBook 165 case. Obviously, it's slightly redesigned because they had to redo the front here for the slightly taller display. As mentioned, this is a 9.5-inch passive matrix grayscale display, but unlike previous models which ran their display at 640 by 400, this runs at 640 by 480, which is a lot more of a standard resolution. It's also worth noting that even though this machine chronologically replaced the 165, which was the mid-tier Apple laptop, this was not the mid-tier Apple laptop. This was the low-end machine. In 1995, Apple introduced the PowerBook 5300, which was a completely new, unrelated design to the PowerBook 100s entirely. And what Apple did is they took that 5300, which became their high-end machine, and put a Motorola processor in it and shipped it as the 190, which then became the middle tier system. I've been saying the model number Duo 210 because that is effectively what the logic board is roughly equivalent to. However, the processor is a 33 MHz 68030. The Duo 210 had a 25 MHz processor. The Duo 230 had a 33 MHz 68030 processor. So maybe this is probably closer to a Duo 230 than a Duo 210, but the semantics matter very little. Being based on the Duo, however, gives these things an interesting difference compared to all of the other PowerBook 100 machines. Well, except for the 190, but that's a completely different box entirely. All of the PowerBook 100s that share this same design, from now on, here on forward, I'm going to exclude the PowerBook 190 from all these discussions because it's a pretty different machine. But they all had a memory ceiling of 14 megabytes. That is to say, there were 4 megabytes on the system board, and the maximum DRAM card size that you could find, even in the aftermarket, was 10 megabytes. That's it. That's all. You weren't getting any more in actual physical RAM. Now, you could run RAM double, or you could run all this other crap, but as far as physical RAM is concerned, 14 megabytes was it. Because this is based on the PowerBook Duo, the PowerBook Duo never had that limitation. The original machines could accept up to 24 megabytes. Later on, they went even higher than that. This machine could have shipped either with 4 megabytes or 8 megabytes soldered to the system board, and as a result of that, you could have, depending on the configuration, either a maximum of 36 megabytes of RAM with a 32 megabyte RAM card, or 40 megabytes of RAM with a 32 megabyte RAM card, depending upon what your configuration was, whether you had 4 megabytes or 8 megabytes. The other thing about the PowerBook 150 that was unique to the PowerBook 100 series machines is that it used IDE hard drive. Now, the PowerBook Duo 230 did not. That was a SCSI machine. Same thing with the Duo 210. But Apple was moving away from SCSI at the time. So this was the only PowerBook 100 series machine to have an IDE hard drive. Now, that was not a blessing. Some people think that it is, because they think that SCSI is hard to find, and it is. They're not lying about that. But you need a disk with Apple firmware in order to get this thing working. So you can't just throw any old IDE drive in there. These days, there are workarounds, invariably, like everything else. But at the end of the day, the limitation was you couldn't just go out to any store and buy just any old IDE disk off the shelf. You had to use one that was blessed with Apple's firmware. And you also had to use a special disk formatting utility that was included with the machine. What a pain. The other limitation on this, even though it's got the HDI 30 SCSI port on the back, which I did verify that the PowerBook Duos did not, this does not support SCSI target disk mode, because, well, it doesn't have a SCSI disk. But it doesn't support HD target disk mode either, so there is no way to connect this to another machine and transfer data that way. So that kind of sucks. The other thing that kind of sucks, there's no ADB port on this, and no way to add one. So if your trackball breaks, as they pretty much always do, because these share exactly the same set of design flaws that all the rest of these PowerBook 100 share, including but not limited to trackball failures, when that breaks, you're screwed. You got to replace that trackball or repair the one that you have. Speaking of that trackball, because this is the last machine that shared this design, this is the last machine that Apple shipped that included a trackball. Everything later shipped with a trackpad. I guess other than those slight limitations, this really wasn't too bad. 33 MHz 68030 processor wasn't awful. You still had the display that had the extra 80 pixels of vertical resolution. That was nice. The extra RAM was certainly welcome. These shipped with either a 120 or a 250 megabyte hard drive, which for 1994, that was starting to get a little bit on the small side, but I guess it wasn't that bad. And as far as an operating system, these would have shipped with System 7.1.1, and they would have run up to, I believe, System 7.6, maybe 7.6.1, something like that. Okay, I've had this machine for months. Like, in fact, it might almost be years at this point. And I have done absolutely nothing with it. It's been sitting on a shelf waiting for me to get to it. And I figured, well, if I didn't make the time to get to it come now, it was never going to come. So let's plug this thing in. Still uses the same standard power supply that all of these use. I don't know if it'll power on immediately when I plug it in. Some of them do these days. Now the screen lit up. So we'll hit the power switch here. The nice thing about this, now it came on. I didn't hit any buttons. I didn't hear any speaker. Ooh. Just heard a noise I didn't like from the hard drive, so I wonder if that's bad. Yeah, it looks like the hard drive might be toast. Brightness control works. So does the contrast. Screen looks pretty good. The trackball tries to work, but the vertical is not great. But it tries. It tries. But I'm going to have to pull this apart because that hard drive, I think, is junk. time for your examination. Taking this apart is basically exactly the same as any one of these other machines. There's the 4 screws on the bottom. I think this one has all of them, but I'm not sure. I know it's missing a screw on the back. There's supposed to be a screw there, but oh well. But I think, assuming that I've got the right size screwdriver bit, which I don't, I'll have to change that. Yeah, here we go. It's a T10, not a T12. That's what I get for trusting my memory. Now you need to be careful with these. As with basically any machine of this era, it has got brittle plastics. And you don't really want to do any more damage than might be lurking in the shadows. And there's probably a lot of it on this. I think these screws are a little bit smaller than on the typical PowerBook 100, but don't quote me on that because it's been a while since I've pulled one of those apart. This is a T10 screwdriver bit, by the way. I thought it was a T12, which is what I had before. Again, that's what I get for trusting my memory. Oh, that's tight. And that's the problem with these. That's why the standoffs break, is because these screws get extremely tight. So we'll pull that off. Now, to pull this apart, again, being extraordinarily careful. Someone's probably going to complain about the video style, I don't really care. There are clips on the front that are smaller, actually, than what they would normally be. The other thing that there is, on the back here, like all of these machines, there is a ribbon cable. You see right there that has to be unplugged. Sometimes you can pull up on this to get that to come undone, but again, you want to be extremely careful. Alright. So that reveals a couple of things. Number one, an evil battery that I should probably remove. I think I will, because it's probably dead. These boards, if you're thinking about this, are not interchangeable between these different models. All the different models of PowerBook 100. So even though it's the same basic design, you can't just change them. That won't work. This right here actually is supposed to be on the bottom of this. It's got some kind of weird sticky substance on it. There's your trackball. This is the part that matters to us. Now, the way that this is supposed to work, I'm pretty sure is like, and yeah, you can actually see it right there, is broken. How exactly this goes in, I'm not 100% sure if it's supposed to be like this. In fact, it probably is supposed to be like this. It's probably supposed to be there or something similar. I don't know. I don't care. I'm just going to leave it out because I'm never going to run a system battery on this thing anyway. So, what do we got? A logic board here. Looks like 4 megabytes. So, probably got 8 megabytes total, which really isn't too much. But that is what it is. This design doesn't have the cover that would be present on like a PowerBook 100, so a couple fewer standoffs maybe to break there, but these ones will still bust. Probably as soon as I pull this hard drive out, this and that over there are going to break. Those two. I think those are the only two that need to come out in order to get this hard drive out, which is what I want to do. And of course this ribbon, which is probably very easy to tear. Okay, so here we go. This is what we've got on the machine. Other than the Global Village modem that this thing has, this is pretty much a bare bones stock machine. Kind of interesting that there's 2 switches there, but only one of them... Oh no, I'm looking at the wrong side. Yeah, is that a programmer switch? That's a reset switch. This doesn't have a programmer switch. So that's kind of interesting. Here's the hard drive. Closer look. This is a 127 megabyte drive. And it's one of these Quantum Go drives. These are well known for failing. because they've got a rubber stopper inside, and that rubber stopper degrades into nothing. Well, it degrades into goo. And that goo gets all over the disc heads, and then that's pretty much the end of that. Would it maybe potentially just need to be formatted? I don't know. It'd almost be tempting to try that, but since I've got another drive sitting around that's probably infinitely more reliable anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and use that. It's also larger. This is a 500 megabyte hard drive. And even though that's double the size of what this would normally have in it, I'm not really a stickler in the case of this for period correct authenticity or anything like that. I don't care that much. You know, as long as it works, it's good enough for me. It's possible, looking at this, that this is actually supposed to go like this, but I don't believe that's the case. So I don't know how that's actually supposed to go in there. It looks like it went here at one point. That plastic thing was supposed to go there. Yeah, there's a couple of tab points there. So it was probably supposed to go in there like this. Although I don't really understand how this would fit in here the right way. I guess like this? I don't know. That's weird. Okay, I went to go change this drive and noticed something interesting. Are you serious? Yet another different type of screw? I almost wonder if those are not original. Though having said that, the Global Village modem also has Phillips screws, so maybe the Global Village modem isn't original either. I don't know. This drive has got no Apple copyright on it. So I don't know. Maybe that has got something to do with why we've got a problem. Not 100% sure, but I'm going to swap it out for this drive anyway. Alright, there's the drive installed in the caddy. And all of that. Now, there's a jumper on this drive that you can't see. I don't know if it'll even focus on it. It should. There we go. Where the other drive does not have one. Now, that means absolutely nothing because the methodology for jumpering for these two drives is probably completely different. Although I thought that on these laptop drives that was standardized. I don't know. It could not be. And given there's only one drive on this, and there'd only be one thing on the IDE bus anyway, it probably doesn't matter. However, strictly speaking, a slave device without a master is an illegal configuration for IDE. Most machines will let you get away with it. I don't know if the Mac is one of them. I guess we're about to find out, now aren't we? Now, as for this, what happens with this and these standoffs and why they break is not necessarily because of brittle plastic, like a lot of people think. Now, some of it certainly is related to brittle plastic, and in fact, if we go over here, we can see that someone has busted this connector right here. And I don't think it was me, because I don't see any bits of black plastic sitting around on my work area. So, I mean, it might have been, but I don't think it was me. Anyway, whatever the case may be, I'm going to have to be extremely careful with that, because if you bust that, well, that's going to be the end of that. You get that on the wrong set of pins, you can cause some serious problems, I'd imagine. But back to the standoffs, what happens is the plastic isn't brittle, but the plastic shrinks. And the metal insert doesn't shrink along with the plastic. So what happens is it cracks, and then it breaks, and then you are left with a screw that doesn't go anywhere, and a little gold ball of sadness floating around in the inside of your machine waiting to short something out and ruin your life. So I'm going to go ahead and put these screws back in. It looks like all of these standoffs are actually okay. I don't see any cracking on these. Yeah, actually they look pretty good. This, I think, is one of the only Macintosh PowerBook 100 series machines I've seen that doesn't have a broken standoff somewhere in it. But I bet if I took the board out, I'd probably find more than one, or took the floppy drive out, or whatever. So I'm not going to do that, because right now I don't really see a need. Let me put this drive in here and get this all buttoned back up. Okay, got that in place. Another word of advice here. Don't over-tighten these screws. That's another good way to break the standoffs. Use 2 fingers and go until they stop. It's good enough. Let me put this the rest of the way back together. The ribbon is maybe a little bit of a touch difficult to put back. It would have been easier to do that with the drive out of the machine rather than doing it with it in the machine like this, but it doesn't really matter. You can do it either way. The heat death of the universe isn't going to happen if you do it the wrong way, so in fact there really isn't a wrong way to do it. If the connector's in there and it's on the right pins, good enough. Okay, even though I would have rather checked it first, I cut the battery out because if you take a look here, you can see that's what one terminal looks like. If it'll focus on it. Come on, camcorder, there we go. That's what the other one looks like. I don't know about you, but it looks like there's a little bit of corrosion starting to form on that, so in all likelihood this is dead. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It says 095 on the back, which I take to mean probably 1995 something. It's been, gosh, 30 years on the nose since 1995. So, yeah, there's almost no way that works. Now, what do you replace that with? Because you probably want to replace that, right? Well, I don't know. And I'm also a dum-dum, although it looks like the board is actually going to fix my problem. It looks like the plus right there tells me where it goes. I didn't make note of where the positive and negative went, although the battery was like this. And I know that because this is the terminal. I lifted it up this way. This is the terminal that gave me grief trying to get it off. So, positive goes in the corner. That battery's junk. Where do you find a replacement? I don't know. I'm sure that the aftermarket community probably has something because I'm sure they've caught up by now, but rather than be the guy that's wrong on the internet, I will tell you do your own research. Okay, using the camera, which will probably die on me because the battery is about to run down, to check whether I've got that in correctly. Now, it won't focus on it, and the light keeps disappearing, but it does look to me like I've got that in there. This is not the easiest thing to do at the best of times on these, and without that guide piece in place, it's even more difficult. I guess I'm changing the camcorder battery, and then I'll be back and we'll power this thing on, see what happens. Okay, back together. Now, let's see what happens when I plug it in. I bang the microphone around and again probably give everybody a headache. Where's the power? There's the power. I don't like the fact that I've got no speakers, but we do have video. I don't think that this is going to boot, whatever this is. In fact, I think this is actually macOS 8, so this won't run on this machine anyway. Yeah. Because that came out of a PowerBook 5300. But hey, it is at least getting somewhere. Although I don't know why I've got no sound. That, again, is a little concerning. But let me get my system disks and I'll see if I can find something. Okay, well I don't have a Disk Tools disk in my set of software here, at least not one that actually will boot on this. So we're going to do it this way and hope that this is going to work. Really kind of doubt it. Because what I'd like to do is I'd like to erase the disk. Hit switch disk. Please remove the system folder on PowerBook. try again. So again, I don't know that that is something that I can do. Because I can't switch to a Finder. That is really hard to read. Because it's not running. I don't know. Yeah, I can't do it from there either. This mouse is not really working. Try a custom install. Let's see what happens. Minimal system for any Macintosh. I actually think I want system for... I'm going to go through this list and I'll figure out what I want off camera because I think I'm going to fight with this trackball. Okay, quit to leave the installer. I can't move the mouse. It's giving me grief again. Where is that mouse? Restart. Just get out. Let's see what we got. Turn to the boot. Like I said, I really would have rather erased this drive because I think that this is from the Hamfest 2024 machine. And I think it locked up. Huh. Okay. Well, I probably need to disable a bunch of extensions that are trying to load. I'll try again. If it will actually come back on here. Maybe it won't come back on here. I might have to hit to disable the extensions. Mouse is moving. And then it stops. So yeah, the extensions are giving me a problem. Let's see if I remember how to do that. I think that's Shift. I hold down the Shift key. I don't know why I have no sound. That's a little concerning. I think if I hold Shift while it's booting, it will disable extensions, which is what I want to do. Yeah. I'll try that. Of course, this machine could just have a problem. Which I think it does. I think the machine just has a problem. So, I'm going to have to revisit this later, because right now I don't have time. It's like past midnight on a work night, so I gotta get to sleep. I don't know why it's not booting. That seems kind of odd to me. But I'm going to have to revisit this at some later time. I'm going to close the video with that. Gives me something to make another video about, I guess. But right now, like I said, I just don't have the time, so... There's an attempt to get a PowerBook 150 running again, but it's going to take a little bit more than that.